You are watching WPTV.
Welcome back to the desk. The Stanley Cup Playoffs have just begun, and Nadia, Josh, John, and Jen are here to break things down in the NHL. Before we get to the playoffs, we have to talk about the NHL Draft Lottery, which took place on Tuesday. The Devils took home the #1 overall pick, the Rangers with the second. Josh, what do you make of it? Who's going to land in our market?
The biggest debate going into this offseason is who's going to be #1, Hughes or Capo. Jen, I know you're kind of leaning towards Capo, but Hughes is really going to be #1. He's been the #1. He's been talked about for like the past 3 years. A lot of teams really like him. He's a young center. He's only 17 years old. But personally, I want Capo, so I'm really hoping the Devils take Hughes. Capo's a strong forward, can ragdoll defenseman, great on the puck. I just absolutely think he's going to be the best player in this draft.
Yeah, I mean, to bounce off of you, I think the Devils really are going to go with Jack Hughes because at this point they're just trying to stack up the middle. They have Hall. So, anybody like Hughes, they're calling him comparable to Patty Kane. So I think he'll complement Hall very well in that middle line. So, I mean, Devils can have Hughes. I, like you, I want Capo because I think he's
rolls off the tongue
perfect. I'm ready to get the jersey. I'm good.
John, you're the only unbiased piece here on this desk.
That is true.
What do you make of the whole situation?
So I think Capo should be #1 overall. However, I think the Devils are in more of a position to take Jack Hughes. I think they really need the center depth. However, I do believe that Capo is the #1 overall. So if the Rangers end up with him, I think that they won the draft, to be honest with you. He's just so strong. His skating, his size, he's a great player for his age.
I mean, just to start off, both of them are fantastic. We can all agree, but Devils fans are definitely with the Triple H, they're calling it, the Hall, Heischer, Hughes, and Taylor Hall's contract's not signed. He's holding his contract up because he has a little friend who might be first draft pick, and the team revolves around Taylor Hall. Hate to say it, but it does. I would love to see the Devils see Capo just because he's more of a substantial player, great on the puck, but he is more of a person to him. He's not scared to make a hit and then make a play after.
Now let's move into the Stanley Cup Playoffs, which just started this past week. All of you guys broke down the entire brackets and gave your picks. Nadia, we're going to you first. Walk us through your bracket. Why did you pick who you picked?
Well, I just want to start, too, by saying that there were a lot of upsets in the first round of the playoffs. So that kind of did mess me up a little bit because, as you can tell by looking at my bracket, I have Tampa Bay and the Maple Leafs coming out into the second round. Of course, the Blue Jackets really showed up against Tampa Bay. They really showed that a wild card against the #1 seed means absolutely nothing. So I was expecting, to sweep them in 4 games. Now we're looking obviously more than 4, hopefully, with the Lightning coming out on top. Same thing with the Isles and the Penguins. I had them in 5 games, but again, we'll see what happens. But same kind of concept. The Isles really showed up against the Penguins, and the Penguins are one of the probably scariest playoff teams to go into when you're talking about the first round of the playoffs. And for the Islanders to really just show up and be like, you know what, we came this far, we're not giving up, we really want this. John, I know you can attest to that. It's like, it's just, it goes to show playoffs, anything can really happen. Brackets are brackets, but it's crazy.
Josh, who do you got here?
So in my final, I have the Winnipeg Jets versus the Tampa Bay Lightning. That should have been the Stanley Cup last year. They're both hungry for it. I'm just going to quickly show why I picked Toronto over Boston. Toronto and Boston won 7 games last year, but they didn't have a certain center that, John, you know the name of pretty well, by the name of John Tavares. John Tavares really adds to this team. They are definitely getting past Boston, but it's going to be a tough series. Again, I would love to see Washington play the Lightning. I think they both match up well against each other, but the Lightning are too strong. 62 wins this year. If they don't make it to the Stanley Cup, it's a failure, especially if they don't win it. Again, the Sharks, strong team all around, both offense and defense. I think they manhandled the Knights in Game 1. They're going to keep doing that throughout the rest of this playoffs. And again, you picked the Flames to go to the Stanley Cup. How many often do we see one play one? It's not going to happen. They're going to lose.
John?
So my bracket looks a little different from the first two. If you see mine, I have the Islanders coming out of the first round and then into the second round against the Capitals and then moving on to play the Tampa Bay Lightning. And in that part of the bracket in the Atlantic, we have Tampa against Boston in the second round. Toronto They showed up really well last night. Great win in Boston. It's just not going to be enough, though. They just don't have the defense to do it.
Having the Islanders in the Eastern Conference, are you feeling that strong about them?
I think so, yeah. I genuinely believe the Islanders can get past the Penguins, and then they will play a tough series against the Caps, and they'll prevail. And then in the West, I got Calgary coming out. It's going to be a Tampa-Calgary Stanley Cup final. I don't love it. I just like Josh said, I don't like the 2-1 seeds against each other, but the West is such a toss-up. Anyone could come out. Calgary's the only team that's dominated all year, so I went with my gut, chose them, and it's just going to be Tampa prevailing in the Stanley Cup final.
Jen?
All right, and if you take a look at my bracket, I definitely had John in my thoughts when I was making this. I put the Islanders beating the Penguins, which I thought it's going to definitely go to Game 6 or 7. It has to. Another matchup that I thought was kind of controversial was Boston, Toronto Maple Leafs. It's definitely that's gonna be another Game 6, Game 7. They're both fantastic playoff teams, but at the end of the day, I really hope Tampa wins. They deserve it, and if they don't win it, they gotta flunk the next few seasons.
Let's talk about this.
Like what?
The one consistent thing from all of you, though, is Tampa's winning the Stanley Cup.
Absolutely.
They just blew a 3-0 lead on home ice against Columbus this week. Yeah. Jen, should they be worried?
They shouldn't be worried, but also they got to remember this is the playoffs, and Columbus Seas were fortunate enough to be in the playoffs as a wild card, and they're going to give it their all. They really are, and they have to keep that in mind. Yeah, you're one of the top teams the NHL has ever seen, but you have to remember Columbus is thirsty to get the cup too. You have to keep that in mind.
With Tampa, on paper, it's just got to happen. I mean, they're just so good in every category, statistically. Every matchup, they have the edge. If it doesn't happen, it's a big mistake. It's a failure. I don't know if they have to retool at that point, but they're just so dominant that on paper, on the brackets, it really looks like it should happen. And I don't know. It's just there's no one that I think could beat them unless they really grind it out in a 7-game series.
No, they're not going to be worried at all. If we take a look at last year, who had a 2-0 lead over the Washington Capitals? Columbus. So again, the Capitals went on to win the Stanley Cup. And when was the last time we saw a team in the playoffs go 16-0?
That is true.
Never.
I mean, I think also what we're looking at too is that, they had such a great series, a regular season. So I think maybe the pressure is finally getting to them. And now that they're finally in the playoffs, they have all this weight on their shoulders. Like, okay, we need to produce. People are expecting, like me in my bracket, a clean sweep. And when they couldn't, show up to that, it's like, oh, you blow a 3-0 lead. And of course, looking at that, you get a little iffy about it. But I think they have it. I think it was just one little mistake. And I think once they get their things together, get it all aligned, I think it's going to be smooth sailings.
It's definitely going to be interesting to see what happens as the Stanley Cup playoffs transpire. But that's all we have at Center Ice. We'll be on the pitch with the soccer crew right after this. Keep it locked.